Hi, this is Todd Malicote, the SEO faculty for Market Motive and online marketing consultant at stuntdouble.com, and I'm here with a guide to site audits part 5. In our final episode here, we're going to be looking at images, title, meta description, and site speed optimization. This is 4 of the 12 sections that we're covering during our series in a series of about 40 or so site audit questions. We've looked at a lot of different areas, and now we're going to tie it together and make some final recommendations and finish up our site audit series. Okay, the first few questions we're going to ask are going to be about images. The first being, does the site have large images? With SEO being tied directly to user experience and how fast pages load, we want to make sure that we have our images optimized, that they display well, that they look nice, but they're not larger in terms of file size than they need to be. You rarely need a file bigger than 100 kilobytes. Smaller depending on the size of the image and for the entire image of this page. It really should be under 100K for the entire page if at all possible. So we can test that with a lot of different tools. We'll look at some website performance testing tools in the last part of this presentation. And for this we just want to look at 3 simple questions. Does the site have large images? Does the site have images with no or irrelevant alternate text on those images, and does the site have site images with irrelevant file names? So I'm going to check just a couple quick things to answer these questions. The first being webpagetest.org or Raven Tools. I'm just going to look at some of the different site performance issues. I can look at any of these. Zoomf is another one. There's a handful of tools we can do this that we'll look at in a little bit more depth in the last section. So we can do this with any of these, or we can do this with Screaming Frog. Screaming Frog's probably going to be the easiest. We're just going to filter by images, and then we're going to look at site size. I lost my size, so you can see I filtered by image, and then I'm going to go over here and I'm going to find size, and I'm going to sort to the largest first, so that would be descending order, largest to smallest, and then I'm going to look at these images and see what they are and see if we can fix them. So I opened this one up in another browser window, and I saw this gentleman caught a lovely large bass, but you can also see that the image is much larger than it needs to be for the page that it's probably on. So that one and this one, you can see these large bass photos. We can optimize these. We can put them in something like Smush It. So we could run this image and just take it and make it smaller. If we were just doing individual images, if you find a lot of them, you'll probably find a easier way to do this. But you can do it by this or by URL. You can do it from your local file and then just smush that image from, it was about 2.4 megs before, and this will probably crunch that down quite a bit. And then it'll tell you the savings in terms of size. And a lot of these site optimization tools are going to do this. They're basically going to save you file size. So we're just going to do this for image. We're going to answer our handful of image questions. The second one being, was there alt text on all of these? So the way that we're going to do this is, with that advanced export, we're just going to do image alt text, you see these anchor text, and then image missing alt text. And then we're going to run that, and we're going to export this to our desktop, and that's going to give us a file like this one here. You can see I already ran this report, so I would have it ready. We can find any images here that don't have alt text. So we may want to name these. We can just look at these individual and see what they are and go back and maybe give these something more meaningful as alt text. File name is another one. Does it have a meaningful file name? I really don't know what these are. There's something to do with the template, default images, but maybe we make this something phishing. This is an opportunity to send a signal to the search engines of what this image is about. And if it's about phishing or if it's about something specific, we want to send that signal wherever possible. We want it to be a descriptive URL about our image. So the image name is important here. You can see a short URL .png is used in a lot of different places here on a lot of different pages. So that could be something else a little bit more meaningful. And we could also include some alt text here for that image. So we'll look at each of these images, try to optimize them in terms of size, optimize them in terms of name, and optimize them in terms of alt text. So these are the 3 areas and the 3 questions that we want to cover within the images section of our site audit document. So now that we've run the tools and we've asked our important questions and we've found the missing alt text and we've identified that the image does in fact have a few large images and a few images with irrelevant file names, we want to remedy this. So the recommendations we're going to make here are going to revolve around reducing the file size of the large images using Smushit or other image optimization tools. We're going to create some descriptive alternate text for the images that don't currently have alt text, and this helps make the website more readable and more accessible as well. And then we're going to rename any images with keywords or descriptive names in places where there may be less descriptive images that we haven't named appropriately when we created the website. So these would be the recommendations we would focus on for the images section of our site audit document. Alright, the next area we're going to look at within our document is titles. This is the 10th area. We're going to look at 4 questions here within the titles area. We're going to say, does the site have pages with missing titles? Well, this is pretty easy to cover with Screaming Frog. We can look for this within our spidered version of the website. Are there pages with long titles? So titles should ideally be kept under 65 characters. We can also see this in Screaming Frog, and I'll show you both of these in a moment. Are there duplicate page titles? Again, we can check this in Screaming Frog. We can see how many instances there are. So all 3 of these we can get fairly easily with Screaming Frog, and we can document any problems. You could also search in quotes for pages using that same title and use the in-title operator at Google. And finally, we're going to look for just any pages with irrelevant, non-optimized, or non-descriptive titles. Titles that could be better all the way around. And after this, our recommendations are going to focus on just improving these titles. So let's look at how we can check these things within Screaming Frog. First, we're going to go to our page titles section here, and we see we get the title, and we get the URL, and then we get this occurrences, and this tells us how many times that title has been used. So how we could check for the duplicate content is just sorting this by the number of occurrences, and we can see that some of these will happen certainly more than once. We have some duplicate titles that are indexed on multiple URLs. We can also check the length here. Again, remember we said we wanted to keep it to about 65, so we can sort by title length and make sure that anything that's over 65 characters, we reduce that. Again, we can get in here and see that some of these may or may not be descriptive for the URL. Again, it's hard to match these up, the title to the URL, when the URL isn't all that descriptive to begin with. But we can certainly make these titles better, so we can make some recommendations at the end of this section of the document. But let's look here for just long titles. You can see there's some short titles. Now here's some longer ones. Here's the short titles. A number 1 or a one fish, these are pretty terrible titles. We want to give examples of these and rewrite these certainly. So we've found some examples. We're going to take the screenshots again and document this. So we're going to document our duplicate page titles and give some suggestions on how to fix those. We'll probably export just a file out of Screaming Frog and put the page titles into a spreadsheet and just go through and rewrite those titles for the client or customer or business partner or for whatever website that you're working on. So we'll do a little bit of that and clean up those URLs. There's also a nice custom report that Annie Cushing has given us within this document to link to your Google Analytics if you're using it. This gives us a nice little just custom report to look at some of the highest landing pages plus their page titles. So we want to see anything that has high entry rates, high visit rates, and then those titles. And you can see there's some of these that could probably be a little bit better. We could add to these. Instead of just saying fishing places, we could give something that was a better call to action, like find the best fishing places throughout the United States, all in one place, 10,000 spots listed. And as long as we can do that in under 65 characters, that's a great title, and that's what we're searching for. That's the kind of optimized, well SEO'd title that we're trying to create. So our recommendations here, the best practices obviously would be that titles are around 65 characters in length, that they have a good call to action, that they are relevant, that they are descriptive, and that they fit all of these, that there are not duplicate page titles. So the recommendations would focus around, here's the page titles that are long and more than 65 characters, here's the ones that are duplicate, here's the ones that are non-optimized, non-descriptive, and here's some examples of better titles that you can use for those URLs. That would be the recommendations for the title section of our site audit document. The meta descriptions section of our site audit document is going to be very similar to that of the title section. We're going to be looking for, are there pages with missing meta descriptions? Are there pages with long meta descriptions, short meta descriptions, or just descriptions that are missing a call to action, are kind of meh. They just don't get people to click through. You really want to pay special attention for your titles and meta descriptions on your important top landing pages that we established through this handy report that Annie has given us in Google Analytics. So first we're going to look for missing, then long, then short. A long meta description would be more than 160 characters. That's going to be too much and not going to fit within that field, and certainly not going to show up in the search results. Short meta description has been deemed around 69 to 70 characters. We want it to be at least that long, and then again, we want it to have a good, powerful call to action. This is a little bit more subjective than kind of the long and short aspects of your meta description. So again, we're going to get back to Screaming Frog, and we're going to go under meta descriptions, and we're going to look for length here, and we can sort the length to find long and short meta descriptions. This is the first thing we can check here. We can export this again. Same story with Screaming Frog. We can sort this in a lot of different ways. You can see there was a lot with way too much meta description. There's 1,000 characters or more in the meta description. We certainly don't want that. And there was some short ones as well. We can sort by missing, duplicate, over, sort by each of these areas, export these reports, and make some suggestions based on, is it too long? Is it too short? Is it duplicate? And either block those pages that are duplicate, rewrite those meta descriptions, make them more relevant, make them more descriptive. And that's what our recommendations are going to focus around. Are the pages missing meta descriptions? Write meta descriptions for the pages that are missing meta descriptions. Are there pages with long meta descriptions? Shorten the meta descriptions from 1,000 characters down to 160 characters or less, etc., etc. And that pretty well covers the meta description portion of our document. This is a pretty straightforward area. Again, you can tie this in with your information architecture and do this for just 10 or 15 pages on your site just to give examples and best practices to the developers, to your customer, to your client, to your business partner, etc. Now, the last section of our document focuses around an area that's important to, I think, anybody who does web development, web marketing, and that is site speed and site performance. We want to make sure that our website is fast, and we have to do this by kind of auditing the work that's done, auditing the size of images like we looked at earlier, and just looking at ways that we can make our site perform better, making sure that the hosting speed is fast, etc. So we're just going to look at a handful, just a brief 4 areas, but you can really get in depth with site and server performance and some of the recommendations you can do there. The first thing we're going to look at is just, does the site have a high page load time? And you say, well, what is a high page load time? We can only compare this to other websites, but we have a handful of tools that we can use for this. We're going to use SEO Site Checkup, we'll use GT Metrics, we'll use Zoomph, that's ZOOMP. We can use Raven Tools Site Performance Tool, we can use Moz, we can use Newstar, we can use Search Metrics, we can use YSlow, we can use Google Page Insights. There's so many of these that we can look at, and they're all going to tell us a variety of the same things. They're going to tell us to minimize the size of our JavaScript, the number of connections to different areas, the number of images and how fast they load, the style sheets and making sure that they're inline and cached, gzip compression is another thing. I don't want to get too technical in this area, but I just want to look at some of these and run these tools and show you the URL locations and how to run these tools and how to understand some of the reports that they provide. So the first one we're going to look at is web page test, and you can see I loaded phishing status in here already, so we didn't have to wait for it. And it's going to tell us how long it takes to load, how long it takes to render different elements that may be slowing down the website, and we can start to document and look at some of these areas and make sure that that we can reduce some of those and increase the speed of our website. I also like Raven Tools has a site performance tool, as I mentioned. We can compare this to other sites. You can see Fishity is much faster than us. They have a redirect, they have a long expiration time, they have all of these things, but most importantly, they load in 0.3 seconds. That's incredibly fast, and that's something we want to strive for. You can see we're a 52 by their scoring algorithm, and they're 87. So this gives us areas of improvement and what we can do to improve here. So if we look at Zoomph, Zoomph will again give us some scoring and some recommendations that we can take back and include in our document. So I may save one of these images and pop that in the document. I may just kind of copy and paste some of this wording or some of these that are most critical. You can see the severity with red, orange, yellow, etc. And so we can look at some of these areas. One that I found was, that an image didn't have caching, or that there's excessive CSS imports. Again, without getting too technical, Zoomph and all these will kind of explain some of these areas of detail. We just want to keep it site speed to these simple things. Does it use inline CSS, or is it using external CSS? Well, we can check that by knowing if it's within the document being inline or external where it's called. And if it's called once and it's used on every page, then it only has to load once the next time they go to a second or third or fourth page, and it makes the site a little bit faster. The same thing applies to inline JavaScript. If it's loaded in the page just once and then rendered and cached throughout the site, then it doesn't have to download that file multiple times, taking up unneeded bandwidth. So Zoomph will actually tell you some of the savings you will get from certain things. You can see the pages that are impacted by whichever issue we're looking at here. And some of these are pretty technical. You don't have to worry about everything, but some of these will have a significant impact on how fast your site is. And when you see that your competitors are loading much faster than you, or just other sites in general are loading much faster than you, you'll want to figure out how to cache an image that's used on multiple pages so that it doesn't have to load over and over and over every time that image is loaded on a different page. You can see one example of that is our page loading GIF here. Just the size of this could be smushed and optimized a little bit. It's a little bit larger than it needs to be, and that's used throughout the site often. So we want to make sure that we cache that within the user's browser, and also that the file size itself is as small as it possibly can be. One of the other tools that Google provides is Page Insights. We can see how well optimized we are for mobile, for the desktop, and then look at some of those issues again and start going through those, minifying JavaScript, making the file size smaller of that JavaScript that we need to load on every page. And there's a lot of JavaScript used in most websites, so this is an area that we can really compress and benefit from the changes made there. So you can see GTmetrix' report. We're looking at a lot of the same information, minifying the HTML, minifying the JavaScript, avoiding inline CSS, and using gzip compression. Some of these are a little bit harder, setting up a browser caching or just some of the more technical areas of server optimization might not be something you want to get into right away, but certainly you want to mention the areas where there are room for improvement. YSlow has a plugin for Firefox. You need to install Firebug, and this is YSlow here. So we can see, again, this will tell us if we have external JavaScripts, try combining them into one. This makes some recommendations for us. So we can copy and paste this right into our document under recommendations. We know that this page has 16 external JavaScripts. Try combining them into one. Again, that's a pretty good recommendation. Just write out of some software, and then you can hand that off and explain to the developer or to your cohorts how to do these types of things. So the recommendations we're going to make in this section focus around those reports and some of the reports that we pull into this document and identify the problems and offer some potential solutions. Like we saw in YSlow, this page has 16 external JavaScripts, try combining them into one. Same thing with the external style sheets with external background images. We might want to combine and minify that JavaScript, combine cache, and externally call the cascading style sheets And then any other optimization techniques to reduce load time. This could include a content delivery network. This is a little bit more difficult and costly improvement. Same with server speed. It might cost you a little bit more to get that dedicated server box that has a higher bandwidth connection that's going to serve your website faster. But you can definitely improve image and HTML file size and lots of other things we can do in the area of website speed and server optimization. And this all certainly affects our search engine optimization, our ranking placement, and how well users perceive our site, whether they come back to our site, the usability, and just the overall experience of the website for our users. So the final area of our document is going to include the conclusions and executive summary. So we're going to go back through and explain the priorities of the document based on a recommendation. So each of those recommendations we made throughout the document, I want you to prioritize those and give some conclusions and then write an executive summary. When you hand this document off to a client, you want to give them the most important, the most prioritized areas, the areas that are going to have the most impact. So when you go through those site speed reports from Zoomf, it'll actually tell you just how much improvement you can expect. You know, as a professional SEO or aspiring SEO, how much the difference that including descriptive URLs and descriptive title tags are going to make. You're going to go back through your document and identify those areas of most importance and include those in a write-up of your conclusion, and then scroll back to the top of this document and basically just rehash that conclusion as an executive summary. Say this is the things that need to change most. These are the areas that you should be looking at and considering first. This is what you should be doing second, third, and so on. And then they have the entire document to go back and reflect upon, to hand off to developers to use when they redesign and overhaul their site architecture or just their entire site as a whole. When they do a redesign, when they retool and do some additional development on their website, that's when they can go back and refer to this document to see kind of the optimal outcome or the best practices involved with their website. And that's really what that site audit document is for. So I hope you enjoyed this series on site audit documentation. You're certainly welcome to contact me and let me know any feedback that you may have on this process. Annie Cushing also has a much more advanced document available. You can see that document. This is just a simple version with about 40 questions. Again, she has maybe up to 100. So thank you for joining me. This concludes the series on